everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Theater Tuesdays. And this is the show where I love talking with musical theater fans and the musical theater community. And this week, I'm really excited. I have the creator, and would you say what's your official position there?
Creator,
Creator,
founder,
founder
moderator, all
of
those
the
words.
OnStage Blog, which covers all things musical theater and theater in general. We have Chris Peterson here. And Chris, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. I rarely get to be a guest on podcasts, so obviously when you reached out, I was like, yes, by all means, let's chat. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, this is so fun. Well, what we like to do with new guests to the podcast, give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what first inspired you with in the world of musical theater. What are some of the early experiences in that you had going to shows and maybe being in shows? What's your experience?
Oh my gosh, what a question. Well,
I know.
where does it all begin? No, yeah. So again, Chris Peterson, founder of OnStage Blog. We've been live now since May of 2014. So we are going to be
Nice.
hitting 10 years next May, which is crazy when you think about average lifespans of these things. So the fact that we're going to be hitting 10 years is nuts. But
Congratulations.
thank you so much. And what's interesting is my earliest memories of wanting to get involved in theater actually came from going to Broadway shows. I mean, every Christmas we would go to see the Radio City Music Hall Christmas Spectacular, and that was like like, oh my gosh, what is this? And then I remember going to see A Christmas Carol at the Madison Square Garden Theater and things like that as a kid. So those were kind of my earliest forms. But really, to be quite honest with you, when it really became serious for me was when I was in probably about 5th or 6th grade. I went to a private school that was K through 12. So we had a lot of interaction with upper school kids and middle school kids. And they would have these Friday assemblies where they do these like preview performances of the High School Musical. I remember one year it was Bye Bye Birdie. And I thought that the students that were performing in front of me in that Friday like preview performance were just the coolest kids I've ever seen. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. They looked like they're in the center of attention. And I want to be the center of attention. So how do I do that? And it was, getting involved in theater. So I got involved in all the school theater, became a thespian in my school club. And from there, I was off after that.
So what shows were you in high school?
Oh my gosh. Well, my first one was The Sound of Music, my freshman year in high school. I was interestingly enough cast as both a soldier and a party guest. And I had a moment of pause because for those of you who can't see me, I am Korean American. So when you're cast as a soldier in The Sound of Music, you have a little bit of like, am I the soldier for the right country here? Or should I put a different flag? I mean, I was a bit confused.
And play a Nazi in your first role.
Yeah, it was not one thing I was prepared for, but it was a great experience. And then I did shows like Guys and Dolls, where again I played I was one of just the ensemble gangsters in the background, but I got to have some really amazing parts. I was in Damn Yankees at one point, got to be one of the ball players in that. So had a really amazing, enriching high school theater experience. And then I went on to major in theater in college. So it was even better.
That's great. I always say on this podcast that I think that high school theater, they should do shows that have big ensembles so that everybody gets a chance to try it out. Because how do you know if you like something or you're good at it if you never get a chance to try?
Exactly. And I remember my casts were like 30 kids. So like everybody had the kind of their moment to shine, and we're busy. So yeah, we got a really cool experience, seeing all angles of how theater works.
And I did some theater in high school. I'm the world's worst dancer. So I'm never going to be, I'm always going to be like way back in the ensemble. You don't even want to
You're the mover. You're the mover.
Yeah.
Same here. I'm the mover. Like that's great.
But I did the Wiz my freshman year. It was a very white version of the Wiz. Probably wouldn't be encouraged now, but we had a lot of fun. And then and it is a great show for high school because it has so many solos and tons of group scenes. So it's really good. And then we did Bye Bye Birdie.
There you go.
Yeah. Then that one's another great show for high school.
Love it. Love it.
A lot of solos, a lot of group scenes. I was an adult and a teenager.
So you got to play both ends of the age
Yeah,
range. So you
like
showed your
flip
range
around.
there. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I was a Nazi soldier and you played an
Yeah,
adult and a teenager. It's
yeah.
perfect.
I mean, it's I would love to be in a community theater production again, just a member of the ensemble. But the thing here in Utah is that everything is so competitive. I mean, even for the smallest of productions, you have huge competition for everything. So it's hard actually. You think with as much theater as there is here, that there would be opportunity for people, and maybe there is if I just dug harder, but pretty much everything is very competitive.
I
it's,
know
it's tough.
exactly what you're saying. I mean, what's interesting, I used to live in Connecticut, and the location, what people don't know about the Connecticut community theater industry, I guess you could call it, is that basically if you go down the shoreline all the way up to basically New York City, there's a community theater in every single
Yeah,
town going down. And what's interesting is that because it's so close to New York, a lot of the people that are in these communities used to be
yeah,
Broadway actors. They used to be
yeah,
professional actors. So imagine you're trying to just get introduced to theater and you're up against someone that used to be on Broadway about 10
yeah.
years ago. So it's a much interesting work, just the same competitive,
Hmm.
type of environment to be in. Absolutely.
It's the same way here because you have a lot of people who live here because they want the environment more, and and so they could make it in New York if they wanted to. They have the training, they have the chops, but you have a lot of productions that are basically equity quality, that are in, just these small local theaters. I mean, of course it runs the gamut, but I'm just saying there isn't a lot of opportunity for like Mrs. Terrible dancing who would like to be involved. There's just not.
Exactly. Exactly.
But maybe someday, maybe someday. But but yeah, so you're living in Georgia, did you say?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
recently moved from Connecticut, being an hour and a half away from New York City and
Mm-hmm.
doing all that fun stuff, to Savannah, Georgia, which is
Wow.
uh, quite the culture change. It is
Yeah,
one of
that
those
would be.
in climate and setting and speed of walking down the sidewalk. It is completely different, but
Uh-huh.
it's been a wonderful change. And surprisingly, there's a pretty healthy community theater scene down here too.
Yeah.
So my son's already been part of a production, so it's been an interesting move.
Oh, that's great. That's good. That's good. So how did you start OnStage Blog? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's an interesting story actually, and one that's actually kind of come full circle, literally like in the past 24 hours.
Uh-huh.
So and I'll get to that in just a second. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. But yeah, no, I started the blog literally 10 years ago to literally, and I'm 100% serious when I say this, to just cover community theater in Fairfield County, Connecticut. That's all I was going to do. I wasn't going to talk about national theater, Broadway. I was just going to focus on the 20 or some odd theaters that were inside this county, in Fairfield County, Connecticut, to promote their shows more, to interview their actors and directors and producers and all these things, just to basically shine a light on what was happening in this community, because it was really interesting theater community. Interestingly enough, probably about maybe a month or two in, we started to write stories about larger issues, such as um, casting issues, issues of yellow face that were happening
Mhm.
on Broadway and professional theater, and just kind of saying like, hey, you know what? I don't like that. That's wrong,
Yeah.
and things like that. And
Did you
it
have
start.
other people initially who were doing it with you, or was
No,
it
it was
just
just
you?
me. It was really just me, and I would say probably within the next 6 months we started bringing on a couple other writers. But yeah, for initially it was just me. And what was interesting is probably about 2 months in, that's when the news that James Barber had been cast in Phantom of the Opera, less than a decade after his conviction for sexual abuse. And what was interesting was a lot of backlash on social media. A lot of people were upset. Friend of mine said, hey, do you might want to write about this on the blog? And I did some research into what happened, because I didn't really know any details about the case either. Wrote about it, and that went viral overnight. Like, we got a lot of different outlets picked it up, because the article I basically said was, this is why you should boycott Phantom of the Opera. That was that
Mm.
was the headline, but you can still see that article today on the blog. And it presented a timeline basically of what had happened. And so what it's interesting is that goes viral. And then of course the demand for this outlet that is going to talk about these issues that theater websites typically didn't talk about back then, was kind of, the demand was there. So we just kept writing more and more and more. And then the whole thing kind of just blew up, and now it's become, I can safely say it's probably the most read theater blog in the entire world. We get an average of about 10 to 15,000 views per day, and we've got a very large social media following. And typically when we post certain things, we get the attention that we're hoping that it gets, and that happened literally today, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit later. But we had another James Barber update, so it was almost like 10 years to the day. We have a kind of a full circle moment where updates on that story came out.
Yeah, I was very impressed. So you did have the James Barber piece today, and you back up every single thing that you say with specific documentation, which I really appreciated. And I guess I was curious, you don't have any journalism background at all? It's all just self-taught?
All self-taught, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I've been doing it. Here's the interesting, I've been writing. I probably should have majored in journalism. I'll be 100% honest with you, because I loved writing for my school newspapers, both in high school and college. I was the arts editor for my newspaper in college. And I just loved that lifestyle of chasing stories and writing and all that different stuff. And funny enough, before OnStage Blog, I was a blogger. I ran a political blog that covered politics in my hometown. It was called the North Haven Way. And all I did was talk about the politics of North Haven, Connecticut. And I kind of cut my teeth, I guess you could say, in learning how to not slander, not libel, how to cover things correctly, how to back things up with documentation and facts, and things like that. So I trial and error, so to speak, I came across. But yeah, I would say large in part, yeah, it's self-taught, but always the love and of writing and doing it. I've been doing since I was in high school.
So a piece like this one on James Barber, what's your sort of end goal? Is your goal to have him in specific, or a wider goal of the entire community, not hiring, doing more background? What are you hoping that will come from this?
It's a great question. That's actually a question I get every single time we post an article like this, where it's like, what do you want, Chris? What is your goal? The goal is a couple of different things. It's actually, to be quite honest with you, all of the above of what you just said. The first and foremost thing is you want to shed light on the actual perpetrator themselves, such as in this case, James Barber, where, these people are doing terrible things. So let's identify that, especially when we have evidence, we have proof, we have admissions of guilt, all those things. Number two is let's go after the system that protected them, that covered up facts, that brought them back into the fold. I mean, keep in mind with James Barber, it's a very specific case where he abused victims in the actual theater space, in dressing rooms, backstage areas. And yet, less than a decade after he was convicted, less than 3 months after he was convicted, while he was standing trial for these crimes,
crazy.
He was being welcomed back by these theaters in the very type of position of power and stature that he took advantage of to inflict his irreparable harm. So those are the things that I need people to realize, that that's what the stories are always about, is calling out the system. And it's not just Broadway. We all know this. It's happening in community theaters, it's regional theaters, it's educational theater. Anywhere that these perpetrators can use, these environments they can use to get intimate access with their victims, they're going to abuse it. They're going to use it. So we need to call these things out. And my hope is that as it starts a conversation, it kickstarts perhaps preventative measures to try to snuff out these people as quickly as possible. And then obviously on the back end, sadly, if it does happen, there's a proper reporting protocol and things like that. I mean, keep in mind with the James Barber thing, he told people about that he had, abused young women, minors, children, multiple times, and never once was it reported to the authorities. It was protected, it was covered up, and it was like, how can we make sure that your image is intact? That can't happen. And so that's, I would say those are really the biggest things, but it really is shining a light on the system. And to be quite honest with you, it goes beyond James Barber. We've seen this happen plenty of times with other abusers in this industry, from William Ivy Long to Ben Vereen, where these exposures come out, these things come out, people know about them, yet because of their talents, and let's not overlook this, 9 times out of 10, it's always men that are brought back into the fold because of their talent and stature.
Mhm.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Do you think it's partly that because it's sort of a creative profession that people kind of like to hope for these like redemption stories, and so they're vulnerable to that kind of manipulation?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And I think what people have to understand is, yes, there are ways that you can be redeemed. I mean, even though I don't necessarily agree with 100% of it, but I mean, look at what happened with Leah Michelle. I mean, she was basically canceled, on social
Mhm.
media. She went through a whole thing. I think it's debatable if she did the work to better herself. I don't think she did, but others do, and that's fine. But she comes back to Broadway, and you could argue that she saved a show that was on the verge of closing, made it a financial success, so that it actually recouped its investment, and now is launching what's going to be a pretty successful tour, and kickstarted what I will believe will be a very long, successful Broadway career for herself. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, she didn't do anything that was criminal.
no, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
But yeah,
the
I get
line
your
that
point.
people, that's the line that people need to understand, is that there are certain behaviors and circumstances that are certainly redeemable, but crimes and felonies and abuse and things like that,
Mhm.
there should always be a line in the sand there. And the fact that that line does not exist for some producers and powers that be is shocking to me.
Well, and the thing with the Empress story is that, for me at least, if they had all, if it was public knowledge and they all agreed, and everybody had, the parents had full knowledge and everybody agreed, then it's technically legal, whatever. But the fact that they kept it secret from the parents in particular was the real damning thing for me. I think that these people were friends with this guy, and he must be super charming and very charismatic, as these people often are, and and so no doubt he persuaded them that, it was just I've changed, that it was just this misunderstanding, whatever it might be. But if you really, really, really believed that was the case, then you wouldn't have any qualms of basically presenting your case before the parents and other people involved, and then you'd say, hey, and then everybody would get a chance to agree or disagree. And that's not what they did. They kept it a secret. And so, to me, that's really, did you really believe that he was actually changed and redeemed? I don't think so. Not if you couldn't be forward about it. And that was very extremely disappointing to me, because I'd been a big supporter of the Empress, still am. I still am supporting them because of the changes they made. But I kind of felt like they were this little diamond in the rough theater in like out of the way Magna that nobody had ever heard of. And I kind of felt like they were my little sort of project that I'd given them a lot of publicity on in whatever little stage I have in the Utah theater community world. And I actually become pretty good friends with Ty, the artistic director, or friendly. He was going to come on Theater Tuesdays. I mean, and so for him to do this was just very disappointing to me. I can't overstate how disappointed I was in him, and that they would all allow this to happen. And and so I'm grateful for your work that you did on that piece. And how did you even find out about this? How did you know?
I mean, I guess it's a double-edged sword when you've been doing for so long, and you've been reporting these types of stories for so long. I mean, if you just kind of just go on our website and just look up abuse, I mean, you'll see just dozens and dozens of articles. So that's really where we've carved our niche, is reporting these types of stories. And I got alerted to it, I think through either Twitter or Instagram. Someone DM'd me and said that the headline that we used is that a community theater is knowingly casting a registered sex offender in shows with minors and not telling anybody that this is happening.
And I found out that he had evidently auditioned for several other local theaters, and in particularly one that a friend of mine does the sound for, and they did a background check and they refused to work with him. And so I give it's Centerpoint Legacy, I give them full props for doing that. But yeah, I'm just thinking this guy must be, like I said, extremely charismatic in order to convince so many people to go against their best interests.
And I mean, that's the thing, is that he's probably a charismatic, talented male performer, which community theaters need. I mean, that's you talk about diamond in the roughs and unicorns, that's the unicorn. So when you get a talented male lead, you tend to overlook certain things. You tend to overlook certain behavior and things like that. But the thing that really struck me about the whole Empress thing was that people knew and didn't do anything, didn't do the due diligence, didn't think that, oh my God, what happens if something happens?
Yeah.
And to me, and it was interesting that the reaction that I got from that article was both obviously supportive and outrage, but then there was some backlash. People were like, how dare you come after us? How dare you go after these people? And what I tried to explain to a lot of them was like, you don't understand what these people did, what these 3 or 4 people did to your theater group, put tremendous liability risk in that community. If this person had abused someone in the theater and then these people knew he was an offender and didn't tell anyone, that makes them criminally liable in that situation. And so to me, when I see theaters with leadership that make such egregious decisions, the only solution for me is that you got to go. That's it. Or if you refuse to go, then everybody else that's in that theater group should leave, because they can't be trusted, with that leadership.
Well, and like I said, the only way because I already had my season ticket, so then it became my question of, well, what do I do? Because I had already monetarily supported the season. That was done. But do I promote it with my social media? Do I, all those kind of things? And so I'm like, I don't know how I feel, what was going on. And so I talked to the director, and what made the biggest difference for me, because they did all resign, everybody involved. And I do give them some credit for just clearing house almost immediately. And it's not like it's a huge organization. So to lose like basically their entire board I thought that was pretty bold action. But anyway, I was talking to the director, and she talked about her experience, because they basically hired her for this job. And so she's not involved in the theater management at all. And she basically said that like a number of the people that were cast in the show were basically the whistleblowers for this whole thing. And so that kind of made me feel like, you know what, I actually want to support this cast. I actually want to support what they're doing, because they are the ones that have actually started to enact change, and that's what I want to support. And so and I'm really thrilled. I guess this weekend they're almost sold out. So yay. So that's
even
great.
better. Yeah. And again, and to just, double down on exactly what you just said. I mean, it's rare that I see a theater that goes through something like this that actually ends up doing the right thing. and truly tries to better themselves. A lot of times you get that stubborn, we're not going to change. Who's this person? We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. To your point, the entire board that resigned, the people that were asked to resign did. And then, the theater elected new leadership, and it sounds like they're going to implement protocols to keep everybody safe going forward, which is, I think that's all I can ask for at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a theater that's been in existence in some form for over 100 years. So it's definitely, I think, worth making sure that it survives this thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it was definitely an interesting experience. I was telling him, like, because I also cover Hallmark movies on Hallmarky's podcast. That's my main gig that I do, and we've had some, I guess, scandals in the world of Hallmark with the CEO having to step down because they removed this ad a couple of years ago and different things, and then now this in my coverage of local community theater. I'm like, you would never guess that doing these things, like, you think that could there be anything more benign than covering Hallmark movies and going, supporting local theater?
That's
but
all I
somehow they
wanted to
manage
do.
everything manages to have drama eventually.
Oh my, unbelievable. It's one of those things where sometimes I say to myself, like, I wish other theater websites would do what I do. So this way it doesn't always fall on me and I have to write the same type of pieces, but but they won't. And I understand why they won't. And so like, that's why I have to keep doing what I'm doing. So.
Oh, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you do have some, like, lighter or interesting posts. They're not all this heavy. But I thought it well, first of all, I want to actually ask, so if people are interested in writing for the blog, what is the process like for that?
Well, first of all, we always accept freelancers, and we do pay our writers. So they can absolutely reach out to us, onstageblog@gmail.com. It's the most basic email address you can imagine. But yeah, you can just reach out to me and put it in the subject line, like, freelance opportunities, interested in writing for your site. And we kind of do like a pitch process. So you can just pitch me an idea, what do you think you might want to write about? And then once it's approved, send it on and we'll get it posted.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pitch you some stuff, to be
Please.
honest.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
that would
definitely
be amazing.
But one article that I really liked, it was by someone named Clara Tan, and it was interesting to me. It was all about the censorship for the recent Music Man revival. And I always saw that as, like, and maybe this comes from my being, Utah, from Utah. I always saw that as a total win. Like, of course you'd want to change the lyrics to Shapoopy. They're terrible. Like, of course you would want it. But I thought her points were very interesting, of the idea of not only does it take some of the edge out of the musical itself, but it changes the arcs of the characters. It changes what's going on with the characters, and it takes it kind of out of its time and place of when it was written. So I thought that was a very interesting. What do you think about that?
I mean, when she pitched that article to me, it was interesting. At first I was like, well, Music Man closed last January. Why are we still talking about it? But what was interesting was the greater theme of what she was talking about. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. Now, I'm someone that usually is a huge, just like yourself, huge advocate. So if something's aged terribly, contains, slurs or, other different things, of course, we want to try to update that for, today's sensibilities. But her point was like, there is a line. There's going too far. There's certain things that maybe we don't soften, but that we don't change. So to your point, we keep that edge. We keep remembering that this was a piece that was written, I think, in the 1950s or 60s and based in the turn of the century America. So there's certain things that still need to be there. And I ended up saying, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. And there's ways to do that. And I think that are impactful and effective and work. And there's ways that I think are overboard and don't need to be done. I mean, I think a good example is, the controversy that you saw with the live action Snow White, movie that's coming out, and how you're replacing all the little people with these interesting kind of different types of characters, and ended up actually erasing the little people characters from the entire movie. So There's definitely overkill, but I do think that it's an interesting thing that when you really take a look at certain things that do need to be adjusted, that do need to be changed, how that might impact the entire end of the show. So that's why I love that piece. And Claire has quickly become one of our better writers, and she's got some really great stuff on the site.
Hey, this is Jen Johans, host of the podcast Watch with Jen, which delivers a steady stream of great movie recommendations, thoughtful career deep dives, and first-rate conversations with film critics, authors, actors, journalists, filmmakers, and more. You can find Watch with Jen wherever you get your podcasts or hear us first at our Patreon at patreon.com/filmintuition.
Yeah. And another article that I thought was interesting was the 10 things I would tell myself as a freshman musical theater major. I thought that was a really good piece. Some of the advice that she would give. And I was curious since you said you were a theater major, not 10 things, but what would be your big advice that you would give yourself?
Oh my gosh, that's a phenomenal question. And I love that article too. And again, like that's the fun art. We love to do fun articles. I don't want to do dark and depressing things all the time, but yeah, no, if I could go back and if I could tell myself, first of all, drop the ego, Chris. When I came into my first year in college, I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I was going to come into this theater department and they were going to be like, who is this guy? We got to cast him and everything. And I definitely needed to be humbled a lot quicker than I was. So I think first and foremost, Chris, when you walk into a room, nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares who you are. This is an opportunity for you to start anew and really take in the experience. Be a sponge and just learn everything. Don't assume that you know it all and stuff like that. So that's my absolute first thing that I would do on that end. And then also I would definitely say, like, understand that it might not work out. I mean, if you came to me my freshman year and said, Chris, maybe you should prepare to not make it and be versatile and take all these other classes and this theater major has to offer, not just acting and directing, I wouldn't have listened to you back then, but I should have, because it would have made me more versatile. I slacked off in makeup design class. I slacked off in scenic design class. I slacked off in stagecraft and things like that. When I was working backstage, helping out as a running crew or assistant stage manager, I wasn't taking it nearly as seriously as I should. So to go back and say, okay, in those moments, take each moment and appreciate it for what it is, learn as much as you can, because that might be a job for you, 4 years down the line, because you have that versatility. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'll never forget when I was in high school, we took a trip up to Broadway, my choir, and we got to have a special seminar, behind the scenes, seminar or whatever. And I don't remember the lady's name, but she played Carlotta in Phantom. And she was an opera singer who also did, Broadway. And so one of the questions that she got was, what would be her big advice to people interested in becoming on Broadway? And I just never forget. She was like, don't major in musical theater. And we were all like, what? And she was like, find something else that you really like to do, because every overnight sensation on Broadway is 10 years in the making. And she had worked as a stockbroker, I guess, for like 10 years before she got her big break, and she was able to sing full time for her career. And I think that almost any field, I think that is true, that you might have the occasional true prodigy who makes it right away, but most, whether it's publishing, whether it's, whatever it is that you're trying to do, most, I think, careers are 10 years in the making.
You're 100% right. And I think, when people think about the Idina Menzel's, when they think about the, Lin-Manuel Mirandas of the world, they don't see the journey and how long it took for them to get there. And in fact, honestly, if someone asked me, Chris, has there ever been a true overnight sensation, like graduated from college, got into a show, and then they were launched and now they're superstar? Honestly, in my entire history of knowledge of musical theater in the recent 20th century, it's happened once, and that was Sutton Foster. And that's it. Like that's the only person I can think of. And when you think about every star, every career, every person that's been on Broadway since or before, to have really just one of those situations proves that point. Like, it takes work, it takes career. So yes, be as versatile and flexible as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I noticed, you do have some movie reviews on your site. It looks like mostly the same critic, Ken Jones.
Mhm.
But since I work as both a film critic and a theater critic, it's been very interesting for me to see the difference between the two art forms. And I don't know if you do any film criticism yourself, but have you noticed in the difference in the two types of critique?
It's interesting. The reason why we started doing movie reviews, honestly, was just because we said, what, we have such a unique voice for theater. Why not take that same perspective and shift it to film and television? And it's worked out pretty well, to be quite honest with you. I think what's interesting is that when we review film and television, I am so much more concentrated on the total picture, the total presentation. I'm not necessarily concentrated on the actor in the center of the screen, so to speak. I'm looking at the entire composition, if you will, the symphony, if you will, as opposed to a single instrument. I think when you're in theater and it's live and it's in front of you, it draws theater basically tells you what you need to look at, at a certain time. With film, it's so much more different. So you really look at it from a total composition standpoint. And when it works, oh my gosh, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, when everything's clicking together. And when it doesn't, you can spot that immediately. You can say, you know what, that editing didn't work. That the music cues there didn't work. The acting, the choice of take there probably wasn't the right one, and things like that. So you can pick up on those things, I think, in film a lot easier.
Well, what was interesting to me, a couple of things. First of all, like, when I first started writing theater reviews, I had to be reminded to mention so much more technicals than you do in film review. I mean, I almost never mention, like, unless it's somebody famous like a Roger Deakins or somebody, like, I'll hardly ever recommend or recognize something like the cinematographer, the editor, aside from your main director, and even sometimes not even that. Like, if it's not something that, if it's not a Spielberg, if it's not a, somebody, a Fincher or somebody like that, that's very standout, then most of the time I won't mention the director. It's almost all about the performances and whether the story works or not works. And then the other thing that's very different is that I have to be so vague in a film review these days. People are so spoiler conscious that you can hardly say anything about what works and what doesn't work as far as the plot. Whereas I found that in theater review, people really wanted those details. They wanted to know, did this specific song, did it work? Did this specific performance in this scene, does it work? And that was a big adjustment to me to get used to being like, okay, they want me to talk about it. How does Bring Him Home work in Les Mis? How does Empty Chairs and Empty Tables? We want to know specifics about the plot, so that was a big change for me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We used to have a writer who wrote for the site that, like, at the end of their review, they would always have the phrase, and in the end, this blah 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 happened. And I used to have to, like, pull them aside and be like, just that sentence does kind of spoil the ending of the show, where you basically, they were basically saying, and at the end, everybody went home happily ever after. But it's one of those things where, yeah, to your point, people want to hear that, especially when you're writing about iconic pieces. It's like, the entire Les Mis production could be amazing, but man, if they screw up that confrontation, I'm not going to come see it. That, things like that. So it's really interesting when you see those reviews.
Yeah, and somebody was bringing up, I thought, a very good point the other day, that with a film, anybody who reads my review can go and then have that exact same experience for the most part. They can watch it and they can have the same experience as me. Whereas if we're theater, 99% of the people that are reading the review won't be able to have that experience. And even if they go to that same show, it's still not going to be exactly the same. And so I thought that was an interesting point, that we are critiquing and profiling that particular moment in time that we got to experience and sharing it with them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the interesting thing about these reviews, because again, it's like if something unique and special happens on stage the night you saw it and it doesn't happen the night that someone else sees it, that person might be like, what are you talking about? I saw the same show. It wasn't nearly as magical and things like that. And I think that's interesting.
Like one community theater I reviewed for Utah Theater Bloggers, I think a performer got COVID. And so then the director had to step in. It was a small part. It was in Oliver. It was one of the bad guys. And she had the script and she literally performed. She didn't have to look at it very much, but again, it was a small part. But you just had to make it work. It was that night. The show had to go on. And I was able to capture that experience. And it was actually a positive of like, this is what happened. She knew the choreography. She knew the, everything and was able to make it work. And so, yeah, you can capture that unique experience just to that day.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I always try to ask my guests here that a couple key questions. One, what do you think, in your opinion, is an overrated show that people love that you're like, I don't love?
Oh, okay. Well, here it is.
It's a safe space. Don't worry.
Safe space. Here we go. I don't, I'm going to say Dear Evan Hansen, to be kind of honest with you.
Yeah. I can understand that.
I mean, at the time, groundbreaking in terms of covering certain storylines and music is swell, but when you really look at it in the broader text, you're like, okay, maybe we're giving this a little too much credit than it deserves.
Yeah, it has such banger songs.
People
are very forgiving of a lot.
It's like, let's overlook this problematic storyline. Let's overlook a lot of these other things. But my God, that song is gorgeous. And the thing that it's one of those, like, especially the year that it came out and the Tony Awards that it was in, when you realize, you look at the other work that was also up for it, you're just like, that should
Natasha and Pierre. Which is so good. Yeah.
Groundhog Day, Come From Away, like all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. What is a show that you think is underrated? It doesn't get enough love.
Oh my gosh. There's two, and it's a tie for me. I'll be honest with you. I'll go way back first, time-wise. One show is a Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt show called Celebration.
Okay.
If people like the Fantastics, they're going to love Celebration. It's a more complex, deeper score. It's a more interesting story, and it doesn't get absolutely near the amount of play that the Fantastics and other shows get of its era. And sadly, we lost Tom Jones a little while ago. So I hope that people are starting to dive into their catalog, and Celebration might be able to become back up and become more popular again. More recently, The Prom. The Prom to me is one of the most underrated musicals of the past 10, 15 years. The music is gorgeous. The story is gorgeous. There are moments in there. Have you seen it, by the way?
I did. I just got to see it. They did it at the Pioneer Theater Company, which is an equity house here in, what was it, April?
Yeah.
Something like that, or May.
Love it. I mean, there are moments in that show, score-wise.
It's very sweet.
Very sweet. I think the first time I heard Untamed Heart in the theater, I was just bawling my eyes out.
And I'm excited because I think that's going to be a huge hit with high schools. I can't imagine that it's not going to be leased by a lot of schools, and I think they will have a blast doing it.
They will have a blast, and it is the ultimate like trolling high school administrators show, because it's like, if you want to shut that show down, you are literally doing the plot of the show in real life that they can use in their marketing. So genius. But Matthew Sklar is an underrated composer, and just again, like that show just sings, and I love it.
Yeah, and the 10 Commandments song, I think that one's the best song.
Oh my God, yes. And
of the show.
To see it with Christopher Siebert when he did it in the original cast, just incredible show-stopping numbers. So yeah. Absolutely.
Good pick. Well, here's a question. So we've seen so many movies get turned into musicals. Most most musicals these days are from movies. Do you have a movie that has never been turned into a musical that you think would be a good one?
So what's interesting is every time like I think about this and I start writing down my list of movies that I'm like, yes, that would make a cool musical.
Uh-huh.
It ends up becoming a musical.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it does not work out. I mean, the last time I did that, I said I wanted The Devil Wears Prada to become a musical,
Oh.
and we got it, and it tanked in Chicago, and we'll never see the light of day probably. But in terms of other movies that I think would absolutely make just incredible movies on that end. One idea that came up was Birdman, the musical. And again, it's like
Oh.
if you could take this interesting, like,
That could be interesting.
yeah, like a
Meta.
darker score, meta score. I think about like oh my gosh, the David Bowie musical, Paramore, things like that, where you're like darker score. Maybe it's like an Ingrid Michaelson, Anais Mitchell type of score, but like Birdman, like that would be kind of cool. And
Yeah.
especially if you do it in a way like the film is, where it looks like it's just one shot, no blackout, it's just one continuous scene for an hour and a half. I mean, could be
That's a
something
very
there,
interesting idea. I could see that.
right?
I always say, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Quiet Man with John
There it
Wayne.
is.
I think
Yes.
that has all of the spots for songs. And I mean, you'd have to change things around a little bit, make it more modern, but I just think it would make a really fun musical.
Oh, 100%. And there's never, like, we don't get enough Western musicals either.
Mhm.
And then lastly, if you want to do the musical romantic comedy side of it, I would all be for a Notting Hill musical. Give me that,
Oh my gosh. I love that
right?
idea. Yeah.
Give it to me. Give it to me. So yeah, come on now.
And I know they've tried this for a long time. There's been a number of attempts, but I think The Princess Bride is just screaming to be a musical as well.
There is a composition out there.
Yeah, there's
It's
several
been-
treatments.
There's several treatments that I need to get my hands on it, because I need to find out what's wrong with it
Yeah.
and why it can't move forward.
Because it really just has like a spot every, like, perfect for songs, I feel like.
Well, for me, 100%. And the big news for me is that, like, I recently heard that they are trying to develop the Muppets Christmas Carol for a stage.
Oh
in
my
Broadway.
gosh.
I mean, that'd be it for me. So
That would be amazing. Huh? They've never, I mean, they did have this Sesame Street thing, right? Didn't
so
they
they
have
did,
on
yeah.
Broadway?
So they've done a couple of times. Like, a lot of people, when Avenue Q came out, they're like, okay, that's a way you might be able to do live puppetry on stage. But then recently, Sesame Street did an off-Broadway
Yeah.
musical. And the rumor that I heard from investors and people that are in the know, so to speak, is
Mhm.
that they were kind of using that
Yeah.
to test out how we could stage a Muppets Christmas Carol. So we
That
shall
would
see.
be, I love the Muppets. I mean, I love the Muppets in general. I have a whole Muppet May series every year on my channel. And I love Muppets Christmas Carol. And they had at D23, they had a whole because it was the anniversary this last time, they had a whole panel with all the Muppets there, and then all and everybody behind the scenes. And so you had the humans and the Muppets, and it was really, really fun. And then they had Jodie Benson sing the song, that got eliminated.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was amazing to
Amazing.
have her, because and then she came out and she was like, I know what it's like, because they almost cut part of your world from Little Mermaid. Jeffrey Katzenberg almost cut it, which is insane. But yeah.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
One question I like to ask people is that some people said that Broadway is basically become an amusement park, that you have like your SpongeBob's and your Shrek and your Disney and your things like that, and that we're getting Back to the Future. We have all these things. And what do you think about that? Do you think it's too hard in these days to make it with an original story?
Yes, the answer is yes. Short answer, yes. But long answer is, look, for the time being, and really for the immediate future going forward, I am fine with the tourist-driven, tourist-centric, popular culture-centric shows, because it'll drive people back to Broadway. It'll inspire another generation of performers and writers and producers and designers. Whatever is going to get people back in mass to the theaters in New York City, go for it. Do it, because that's what it's going to have to be. And people tend to forget that, like, even in the golden age of musical theater, a lot of those musicals were based on the popular entertainment of the time, popular mediums of the time, whether it was based on a book or an actual play. I mean, right. Oklahoma was based on a play that opened like a couple of years before it. So I am fine with musicals being based on movies. I am fine with them based on TV shows, whatever is going to get us back. And then the success that they have will hopefully then trickle down to other shows that do have original stories or compositions. I would also love to see the off-Broadway industry strengthened by this, and see more investment into off-Broadway. So yes, go see Back to the Future. It's an incredible spectacle. Have a great time. But then also go see this other show that's on 50th Street in a 200-seat theater that's going to blow your socks off as well.
Yeah. Well, and we also have to always remember that a lot of times these IPs are just a jumping off point for incredible creativity. You think of something like The Lion King, where Julie Taymor used that to reinvent what we knew as Broadway musicals. And so, we get the puppetry and the just the visual spectacle of it all. And so I think that's important to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. I wish more designers, I shouldn't say designers, because this is their job. They take risks, they break new ground all the time. I wish directors and the other people on the creative team that approve those ideas would do more, would break through more barriers, because again, the more Lion Kings, the more Beetlejuices that we can get, the more She Loves Me we can get, where it unveils new ways to design shows, to stage shows and things like that. Do it, because this is all it does is create a ripple effect that will lead to further ideas and innovation. So,
well, we like to end our interviews with some fun get to know you questions.
We're over at the end. Oh my gosh, this is like blown by. I love this.
This is really fun. We'll definitely have you back. But the first question is, what is the best ice cream flavor?
The best ice cream flavor?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll just go with, like, if I walk into an ice cream shop, what's the flavor I'm looking for?
Yeah. You're in Baskin Robbins. Which one of the 31 you getting?
Cookie dough every single time.
Okay, good.
Every single time.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. What is your favorite original cast recording?
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is it. This is going to sound weird, and I don't want to be judged. It's basic. It's a basic question. It's Phantom of the Opera.
Okay, good.
I mean, listened to it so many times. Can't even tell you.
I have a huge nostalgia for it. My grandma, when I was, I don't know, like 9 or 10, gave me a Best of Andrew Lloyd Webber cassette tape for Christmas.
Is that the one that it was the red curtain and had all the logos on the front?
Yes.
I had the same one. I kid you not. I listened to, I think Barbra Streisand's As If We Never Said Goodbye was on that recording. Listen to that all the time. By
Another
Jeeves,
Suitcase, Another Hall.
Another Suitcase in a Hall.
Don't Cry for Me, Argentina.
By Jeeves from By Jeeves, I think, was on that recording, and I listened to that a bunch of times. So that was another tape or CD that I listened to all the time. But I will say this, one of the best sounding, engineered cast recordings. If anybody wants to ever listen to a perfect sounding cast recording, it's Wicked, honestly. Wicked. When you listen to Wicked, you listen to how they present and produce all the sound, all the ensemble. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, and so my grandma took me to see Phantom of the Opera that next year. And it was the first like Broadway. This was in San Francisco, but it was the first Broadway-ish kind of show that I'd really ever seen. My dad had taken me to the Shakespeare Festival here in Utah, which is Equity. It's Tony Award winning. I'd been to some things there, and I had a teacher who was playing Anybody's in West Side Story right around that same time. So those were like my first introductions to theater. But I always have a lot of nostalgia for Phantom of the Opera. And I was very glad because I got to see it last year in March before it closed. So that was fun because it was one of the only shows that was playing on Monday nights. And so I was in town, and so I decided, what the heck, I'll go see it again. And it was really great.
Love it.
So
Love it.
Good choice. Okay. So what is your go-to date night food?
Ooh, honestly, Chinese food. My wife and I, Friday nights, Chinese food, sit in front of the TV.
Yeah.
It's the best thing ever. Yep.
Yeah. Well, probably going to a show, but aside from that, what was your go-to date night activity?
Ooh, okay. So, okay, this is I'm publicly disclosing information that other former dates of mine might be like, wait, he did the same thing with every girl.
Yeah.
So my wooing move, if you will, was to take them to a park at night to do like a late night picnic, listen to some music, dance, and just watch the stars and stuff like that. So that was like a good like second or third date to say like, this guy's kind of, different. He's kind of romantic and things like that. And I think I went to the same park for like 7 different dates. So
well, and it's a good one because you can exit at any time.
Anytime, like finish the meal, get out of there.
This has been good. Let's go.
Let's go. Exactly. Easily many escape routes. It's in a park, so there's no. But yeah, so if there's anyone listening that I might have dated that is, they're like, wait a second, he did that with everybody. That was what I did. That's what I did.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, you're married. It worked.
Yep.
So which do you like better, dogs or cats?
Dogs. I'm allergic to cats. That's why.
Yeah. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
Ooh. It's tough. I hate the beach because I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. I hate it. I also am scared of heights, so I don't like mountains either. But I will say, if I had to go to one, I would probably go to the beach. But I'm gonna like not go on the beach. I'm gonna sit on the boardwalk and watch everybody
Anakin.
else.
You don't like sand.
Of course, it gets everywhere. Exactly. We're the same, and so I will gladly go to the beach and watch from the promenade, the boardwalk, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. All right. What is your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Christmas, without a doubt. You know why? Because it's a month-long celebration. It's not a single day.
Month-long in the world of Hallmark. We're about to get started.
I was gonna say, once like Labor Day is over, it's like we start getting into it. I love.
Yeah, it's like amateurs month. What is your favorite musical movie?
Oh my gosh, another incredibly hard question to answer. Okay.
There's a lot of bad ones.
A lot of bad ones, but honestly, 1776. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I've seen it 50 times and I never get sick of it.
Yeah, I wish I could have seen the all-female, the gender swap.
It was very interesting.
I think that would have been interesting.
Again, things in it work, things in it didn't, but I appreciate the attempt, honestly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, very good. You did it. You answered all the questions.
Oh my gosh, that was fun. Oh my gosh.
That was really incredible. Fun. Well, thank you so much for all you do. I think you are very important in this industry and this art form that we love so much. And I'll definitely be in touch, and we'll definitely have you back on. Thank you so much. And if people want to follow all that you do, how do they do that?
Come to onstageblog.com, start there, take a look at all of our content, but we're also OnStage Blog at Facebook, on X, I guess now, Twitter.
I just still say Twitter. I don't care.
Oh, I hate that app. I wish I could close that account if I could, but I can't. We're also on Threads now as OnStage Blog and Instagram. So yeah, check us out.
Very good. Well, thanks again. And you can find me at rachelsreviewstheaters.com and at all the social media, Rachel's Reviews. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, and you have our playlist to all of the Theater Tuesday content. And I really appreciate that support. And we also have the Patreon group and merch store. Check that out. And thanks so much. It was great to meet you. And we will definitely be in touch.
Love it.
Bye,
Thank you so much.
everyone.
Bye.